Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Yves. I'm a faculty at HEC Montreal in the management department. I'm also in charge of our graduate program in sustainability. And what I want to talk about is my experience integrating projects into a course, projects around net zero. So the name of the presentation is creating a net zero plan for an organization, but it's not exactly creating the plan as much as helping an organization achieving its climate goals. So if we can go to the next slide. So I will present briefly in which course it can work, format and length, main learning objectives, but then I will illustrate with how I use it so it can give you ideas as to how you can do it. Essentially, I came with, and you may use projects in your courses, but here the main difference is that it really the whole course focus on the project. And I came up with this idea because I was a little bit fed up to see that students, they were aware of climate change. They had tons of courses that could help them see the big picture, but they failed to see the challenges in achieving it at the organizational level. And although they knew that they had to do something, they often felt that companies were not doing enough, that they were not taking it seriously. So I thought that an effective way to break these assumptions, or actually to lead them into action, it would be to actually confront them to reality. So here's the reality of an organization. There's constraints, they have objectives, and how can they do it, right? So so what I did is essentially integrating a project related to a climate goal of an organization. So in the first time I did it was with the Port of Montreal, which is actually a fairly large organization, very important, but that has very limited control over its emissions because 98% of its emissions are Scope 3. So this project, I use it for graduate students in sustainability. So it was an elective course, and the course was structured around the project. But I will apply it again with my MBA students for a climate adaptation project, and then also with the undergraduate students with something at a smaller level, but the idea is the same. Format and length. So it's not a traditional project that they can complete within a day or a week. It's really a project that extends over the whole course. And the way I do it is that I begin with the project and then I end with the project. And I will explain why a little bit later when I show what I observed. What you need, an organization willing to collaborate. It can be any organization, and a team of mentors, and I will explain why later. And my main learning objectives with this was to have students have a better understanding of the tools to prepare organizations for climate change. And the most important one is that they would be able to apply those tools to an organization. So really work on the competencies. So often we work on the knowledge and less on the competencies. And I've seen that with our MBA students, is that they have a project at the end and they don't know how to work. They really struggle with this. So here I decided to really focus on the project, put the knowledge in the background, but force them to go seek the knowledge that they need to solve the problem. So if we can go to the next slide, I will explain how I organized it. So next slide, please. So the first time I used that, it was for my net zero bike tour. So yes, there's bike in it, and that's another story. We could have a full presentation on that. But essentially, the course is structured around the project. So I begin 3 months before the course, 4 months before the course, and then I have a discussion with the Port of Montreal to see, okay, so you have your plan. Where are you in your strategic plan? And every year we change the problems that students will focus on. So there's an umbrella problem or an umbrella challenge, which is how do we get to net zero by 2050? And then there's small problems that they face. So it could be about the electrification of boats. It can be about How do we mobilize people? So all problems that are part of the things that they need to achieve net zero by 2050. So I begin the course with the kickoff meeting at the port, and they have no background whatsoever into the concepts that they will need to mobilize in order to solve the problem. And then 1 month later, they have to present. So it puts a lot of pressure on the students. But it's also nice to see, because at the beginning, they are really afraid. There's a lot of anxiety. Will I be able to meet their ambitions and so on, right? So it forced them to be engaged. And then they get the help of mentors. So each team, because I divide them in 4 teams, each team works on a specific problem, and I find a mentor that will help them solve the problem. And in parallel, we go meet companies that are facing similar challenges to stimulate their ideas, and they have to work independently. And at the end, they present their solution. So for me, the aha moment was really like, okay, so they have seen this in their courses, but they are not able to apply it. And then by being forced to work on a specific problem with the organization, then they realize the importance of this, right? So for a lot of students, they have, let's say, beliefs about finance being bad, being part of the problem. They don't want to take economics courses because they don't see the relevance for this, right? But then by being confronted to the reality of an organization, they learn, or they discover that, oh, okay, that's something I need to know, because I need to speak the language with the people in finance, with the people in HR. So they really see the complexity of the transition for an organization. And that's the thing that is really, really nice. And for some of them that were talking about degrowth and so on, right? Now they see that, okay, so that may not be part of their reality. How can I work with this organization in order to have them reduce their emissions? And maybe along the way, I will be able to have a conversation about this. So essentially, that's the project. That's my activity. That's something that I use. It worked very well with graduate students in sustainability. I'm going to do it with MBA students with another company. And it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the instructor because your teaching is more effective. It's a win for the students because they are much more motivated, much more engaged. And then they get practical skills, practical competences that they can apply that are valuable on the market. And it's a win also for the companies that work with us, because then they have an external view on their strategy, and they can actually think more about what they are doing. Sometimes they are not doing enough, and then they realize, oh, okay, yeah, I'm not seeing that, or they thought that they were not doing enough, they were not sure, and then it may confirm what they were doing. So that's it. I think I presented most of what I had prepared, so I will leave the floor for questions if there's any.
Perfect. Yes, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah, questions. Oh, Yuri, jump in.
Yeah, it's a fantastic presentation. I would like to ask the small projects that the students will confront throughout the process.
Yep.
Are those problems that were already solved in the past by the company, and so
No.
mentors can help them, or are actual problems that the
It's
company
actual problems. So the first year that I did it, so it was challenges that they were facing. So they already had started working on these, but they wanted a second opinion about what to do. They had, and it's really tough, right? So if you want to reduce your emissions and get to net zero, so they kind of thought that they had an issue with this. They were not sure. So it's like, okay, let's put a team that will work on this, right? And then the students can ask questions. We have meetings every week with the partner, and then they can follow up. But no, every year the problems change. It's not something that was solved. It's something that is currently in their mind and that they are trying to address.
Perfect. We have 2 Michelles, so we'll start with Michelle R.
Thanks. Merci, Yves. It was super interesting. I have a bit of a question about the backstage of everything. So
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit about how many students are in each team? And you mentioned the importance of mentors.
Yep.
who are these mentors? How do you find them? What is a good mentor for this type of work? And I think if I understood you correctly, you mentioned also that you would provide them with example of other businesses struggling with the same issues or similar issues. So how do you go around and do that?
Okay, so first thing, so the teams are teams of 4 or 5 maximum. So my bike course, it's only 20 students, but I will have more students in the spring. For the mentors, I really work with people who are specialists with the problem. So for example, one year there was a team that was working on carbon offsets. So I found someone who was a specialist of carbon offsets. Now we're talking about circular economy. So this year I will have a project on circular economy and how they can integrate that. So I have someone who's a specialist on circular economy. Sometimes it's people who accompany their organizations in their strategy. So essentially it's practitioners who are specialists in their field. How I find them, LinkedIn, personal network, a bit of luck. So now I'm lucky because the problem I have is that I have too many people who want to participate. Because of the advertisement that we had a few newspaper articles, we had things like that, and now people contact me, and I have former students who want to help. So they work with companies, they talk with someone in the company, and then they say, okay. And the last question was
it was about how do you mentioned providing examples of other companies facing similar issues.
It's yeah, so every year there's a few key companies that we go see, Hydro-Québec, for instance, or Énergir, because I mean they are key actors of the transition, and they face challenges of mobilizing people, working with clients, which are very similar to what the Port of Montreal is doing. So these companies, they present their strategy. Sometimes they have good strategies, sometimes they are very bad strategies. But the idea here is that students are exposed to different ideas, and then they can pick and choose what may work in that context, or they may think about the problem in different ways. So some of the people we meet are companies, sometimes it's scientists, sometimes we go see sites that transform significantly over the years. So I have meetings with architects, I have meetings with all different people to really have them think differently about the problem that they are facing. Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll go to Michelle A before moving to the next presentation.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, very interesting that you're considering and work with the Port of Montreal, because I think it's really a very, very interesting organization to look into because of the interaction it has also with the city and with the industrial clusters and so on. The question I had was, you are working with a small group of students, and one of the challenges I have is that there might be different skills, different levels of motivations with the students. So I wanted to ask you a little bit more about how do you actually ensure that the learning objectives of the course are met, or the assessment, how is that performed within the course?
So we could have an hour conversation about that, but essentially, I'm lucky because I select my students, and the reason why I say that, it's not because I don't take the bad ones, it's because I have their CV in front of me, right? And I compose the teams myself, so I try to have different expertise together that will be necessary to solve the problem, and they have to work together to build on the expertise of each other. So this way, they all have something that they need to bring. They may not know it at the beginning, but by the end, they realize that they need it and that their skill is valuable to the team. So that's essentially how I work. So I don't want homogeneous teams. I don't want teams who are already specialists in this issue. No, that's not the goal. The goal is really have them mobilize the knowledge that they already have, so that they can make connections, go pick additional knowledge, combine that, and then apply it to the problem. So that's how I do it. But it's true that motivation is different from one team to another, but it's something that they have to learn as well. That's the reality also in an organization. So, but maybe we can continue the conversation after.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Yves. It's been wonderful. And as a oh, Michelle, is your hand still up from me? Okay.
Yeah, no. I just wanted to ask a question, maybe to the entire audience, but specifically also to Yves. One of the experiences I had is that sometimes I see a lot of enthusiasm for firms to collaborate in courses, especially when students are involved. And then sometimes you feel like there is a little bit of uncertainty, and then they tend to sort of withdraw from the willingness to collaborate because they are worried that maybe things can emerge that might sort of harm them. So I was wondering whether in the case of Yves, whether you have experienced this, or whether anybody else had similar experiences where, you know, on the one side, there is a lot of enthusiasm, but then when companies start reflecting a little bit more into the details of, you know, what they will need to show students, they maybe get a little bit more wary of risks of misinterpretations and all those type of issues.
Yeah, actually, it's a very good point, because a lot of companies won't collaborate with us, but they don't realize initially what it means, right? It means that they will share information with the students. In my case, what I've seen is that it's really based on a trust relationship with the organization I work with. So with the Port of Montreal, I was lucky because it was I made a call on LinkedIn, but they already had experience working with other universities, so they knew what to expect. So it was easy. We had a confidentiality agreement and all of that. They had a format, and then we've been able to work this way. But then the first year, it's always a test because they don't know what to expect. Will we get something out of it, right? And at the end, they say, okay, we want to have a 5-year partnership with you. So it's really a long-term relationship. The one I will do with my MBA, it's a company that I've been building relationship with for the past 2 years through the course. So they were invited as a speaker, and then we talked, and sometimes they didn't have nice interactions with the students. And then I talked to them in September. I was like, well, okay. They contacted me. It's like, well, we'd like to be a little bit more involved. So we said, okay, so here are the possibility, but also hear what it means. You need to share information, right? So don't share information that you don't want to share, that you're not comfortable sharing. But at the same time, you need to commit a little bit, because if it's just information that I can find on the web, it's not that interesting. And also what to expect is that you're going to contribute to their learning. And if at the end you have one good idea, then it's a win, right? You'll have that from it. But don't expect like what you would get from a consultant, right? So that's not, you're contributing to their training. So I think having that clear from the beginning, it's really key. But I had conversation with other companies. They want to showcase how good they are, but if they are not willing to question what they are doing, I don't work with them. So that's essentially my approach, and that's, I think, what we need to do, because we have also a responsibility towards the students. We're not here for greenwashing.